Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Mike Force Podcast. Well, formerly known as the Mike Force Podcast. It's now Mike Glover Show. You guys, because of your feedback and all the comments that I read on Spotify, on YouTube, one, I want to say thank you so much for all the support and all the affirmation of saying, hey, get back to it. We're excited about it. I'm super stoked to present the Mike Glover Show. I've been podcasting for a decade. I started podcasting around 10 years ago, really to get things off my mind, off my chest, things that were, I believed at the time, providing value for you, but in hindsight now, I realize was therapeutic for me. And a lot of those independent episodes were more about talking about experiences and things that I was going through in a very peculiar time in my life, transitioning from active service, CIA, and then into Fieldcraft Survival, my business. And so it's been a while. It's been, going on 10 years. This whole thing that happened with me in May derailed everything. And honestly, I didn't have the motivation to get back to it. I talked a lot about that in the last video. And I didn't know if I could. And then I read you guys' comments, your feedback, and I looked at the numbers and said, okay, there's a lot of value that's being proposed here that people are telling me is changing their lives. And certainly that's been the case for me. Interviewing MACV Saga operators from Vietnam, special operations guys who served in the GWAT, some that are my real good friends. Even people like Amanda who overcame cancer and is now doing endurance athletic events in order to raise money for charity. That all motivates me. And I want to continue to provide that, but I also want to continue that journey for myself. I love talking to people, especially that are overcoming adversity and their life journey. You know, it reminds me when my first team sergeant in 3rd Group was telling me that I should carry a book everywhere I went. He said, hey man, like one thing that I've always recognized in good squared away leaders is they always had a book. So from that point on, I carried a paperback book in my cargo pocket, top of the toilet, like everywhere I was, there was a book because I was learning vicariously through somebody's experiences, and it was like an AAR, an after action review. And that's what I want to continue for you guys. So what to expect from Mike Glover Show? Well, I think a lot of the usual, but on top of that, I don't want to just interview people who are popular. I want to interview everyday people who have overcame adversity, who went through their own story of survival. I think that's something I'm very interested in. It's why I started a survival company. It's why I wrote my own book called Prepared, a manual for surviving worst case scenarios. And I think it's important that we talk about those stories and extract the little blue chips that allow us to apply those things to our lives to benefit us, because there's so many of them. You know, whether it's like the psychology, the neurology, the experience and how they grew up, or just the tips and tactics that they've implemented. I think all of that is important in lining out a good podcast, and that's what I hope to provide. Not only will I provide the interview experience for you guys, I'll also do podcasts like this, where I'm essentially just shooting the shit with you, talking to you about resilience, talking to you about survival, preparedness, because it's right up my alley. It's one of my profound interests in life, is looking at things that are happening in the world and distilling that information for you guys so you could be better prepared. So that's what I hope to do for you guys in the future, and I hope you enjoy it. Also, I don't have a ton of corporate sponsors. Actually, the only sponsors I have are the sponsors for the companies, mostly my own, that have supported us through this difficult time. Fieldcraft Survival took a huge hit. It's nearly taking a large company and made it very small. But I'm rolling with it and evolving and adapting every single day because I intend to survive. And once we reset, I intend to thrive. And so if you can support this channel, the best way you could do that is by supporting our partners, mostly my own company. And so I'm going to roll into a clip right now to offer you a small segment pro tip, which I intend to do every once in a while. So let's get into it. Hey, what's going on, guys? Mike Glover, 1 minute pro tip for you guys on home defense or personal defense. When you have a center-fed door, it feeds into a room from the center, just like a corner-fed door would do from the corner. This is a center-fed. One of the things that we want to do when we clear through a center-fed door, imagine this is the outside, I'm going inside of this room, is I want to focus on using my eyes and clearing as much of the room as possible. So when I use the angles and can see inside of the room, I'm clearing essentially 95% of the room, except for the cuts. The cuts are inside the corners of the room. So that's what I need to clear. Now with two people, it's easy to simultaneously clear because I have one person step here while the second person steps here. But with one person, you only can clear one corner at a time. So go to the corner that you likely suspect somebody would hide. If it's your own house and you know a TV is on this side and there's an open space here, I want to go towards the threat because I want to be able to address it. Obviously, if I was going to the opposite side, I would have the threat to my back. So I'm going to step into the space. There's nothing there. Visually see nothing is there. I'm immediately going to turn and clear this dead space, which is this cut that's in this room. Again, this is part of personal defense and home defense. We have an entire series that I'm filming for the Fieldcraft Survival application that you could click in the link down below to get it on iOS or Android. Thanks, guys. All right, guys, if you're interested in that type of education, you can download the Fieldcraft Survival app. I have linked it down below, and I appreciate you guys. All right, let's talk about a couple things. Let's talk about complacency. So these are natural things that are happening even in my life. As I saw Trump win, and I knew, oh, man, you know, that overreach that we were seeing, it's not going to happen. That suppression on social media, it potentially is not going to happen. I felt at the moment better about my situation and the country's situation, but that's led to complacency, even in my own life. Like even habitual things that I do every single day and everyday carry, like carrying my fanny pack, which is right here, ironically, in arm's reach, having the ability to protect myself and apply first aid to my family or friends. Those things within arm's reach became less applicable after things happen politically. And I'm like, why is that happening? And it's just because it's natural. It's natural to get complacent when you feel good about the way of the world. When you wake up every single day and you're enjoying your life and you're living that best life, then that's likely when the worst case scenario is going to happen and you need to be best prepared. So consider this, I don't know, a verbal getting back to basics, to not be complacent. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you a couple reasons why. And I want to preface this by saying I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm trying to tell you what I think is going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months based on what's happened politically and what's happened in the past. The first thing is a lot of the things that I predicted happened. Not toot my own horn, but I also am not making shots in the dark. I'm not making this stuff up. For example, I said Biden wouldn't run. And I said that because I saw a lot of the indications that his team was setting the stage with legacy corporate media by putting out the talking and sound bites that were going to facilitate that transition of power. And it happened. When I see what's happening now politically with the incoming administration, there are some concerns. And let me line that out for you. And not concerns politically, but concerns for me and you. Let me give you an example. The mass deportation of illegal immigrants. It breathes very well. I mean, 75 million Americans, I think the overwhelming majority of you voted because you wanted to see that happen. You were fed up with stories like Laken Riley, who was murdered by an illegal whose own travel was facilitated by a government program. Like, ludicrous to think this happens in our country, but it does. And Laken Riley's case caught attention, but there's many more cases that have been involved. For example, 4,000 people under the Biden administration supposedly passed away while trying to cross into the United States. That was just announced by Tom Homan, who's the border czar in charge with the new administration to essentially deport all illegal immigrants. And why is that astounding? Well, it's astounding because these numbers often are not talked about. And we think what we see and what we read in legacy media is the whole picture. It is not. There is a radical picture beneath the surface if you're willing to scratch it. I don't even know if that makes sense, but I'm going with it. So let me give an example. A 2-year-old the other day was caught on camera. They blurred her face, which is appropriate. An unaccompanied minor who was 2 years old crossed the border illegally, and she had a phone number written on a piece of paper that was taped to her chest. These are the conditions, and based on the legal precedent, the standards that have been created that are allowing this to happen. And I feel bad. Like immediately when I saw that, I was like, man, I wish I could adopt that 2-year-old girl. But why is it happening? Because drug cartels are facilitating illegal migration based on an open border policy of millions of people. The estimates are between 10 and 20 million, which is very broad. So imagine a day where President Trump, who's given authority decentralized to Tom Homan to use his power and authorities to mass deport illegals, starting with the criminal elements across the country. When that happens, what do you think is going to happen as the second and third order consequence? Well, here's number one. There have been many governors, mayors, and elected officials who have said they're not going to support it. And in fact, they're not only not going to support it, they're going to obstruct it. They're going to obstruct justice. Now, Tom Homan said they're going to put them in jail if they do that. But for example, the governor of Colorado said he would use Denver police officers to stop federal agents from removing illegal criminals. Now, it wasn't illegal criminals as he outlined. He said, I would protect my people. Well, if protecting your people is harboring illegal immigrants who have already committed a crime, by coming across the border illegally, he's talking about deporting, starting in phase 1, illegal immigrants who have conducted already crimes against American citizens. And you're saying you're protecting your people? Which ones are your people? Because I thought like American citizens were your people, but I guess not. So one, I think that's obstruction. But two, the controversy or the conflict is the chaos it's bound to create. Because what happens when a Denver police officer is standing the line because he's following orders from his governor, which seems like a Gestapo to me, and he's saying, you will not enforce these laws. You mean the laws that the American people voted for? You mean the laws that are going to make our country safer? You mean the laws that are facilitating 300,000 unaccompanied minors and children disseminated across the country where we have no idea where they are because of these passive laws that have allowed this to happen? Because of this passive border policy that have allowed this to happen? I don't think so. So now take a step back and imagine at the same time, as announced by Tom Homan and the administration, they announced that the cartels, there's 5 major ones in Mexico, and also other gang-affiliated cartels that are in the United States. Imagine overnight, those gangs that are affiliated with RICO doctrine are now affiliated with Al-Qaeda terrorist doctrine. Why does that matter? Because the title and authorities and the funding, even the reference for the assets that are utilized, the Department of Defense, etc., are going to be brought to bear to target offensively all of these criminals that are now terrorists. You remember right after 9/11, even well after 9/11, we were still arresting on federal charges people who are facilitating, enabling, and supporting, maybe even financially, terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda or ISIS. We were putting people in prison for life sentences for doing that. Now, can you imagine overnight criminal elements who have never really been targeted because of the lack of resources and assets or laziness on law enforcement side, the federal side, and now we say all these people are terrorists. So if you're a cartel drug dealer and now you're talking back into Mexico with your cartel buddies. Now it's not local, it's not federal law enforcement that are waiting for you to make a mistake and then rolling you up on charges. They're targeting you with one of the 17 to 18 intelligence organizations like the NSA, the NRO, the CIA to target you, use signal intelligence to directionally find you, and then do a raid on your home and then roll up all your partners and affiliates. I imagine like the empty whiteboard that's empty now, the day that it transitions into all cartels or terrorist organizations, it's going to be a bad day for the cartels, but also complete chaos for American citizens. Imagine now you're a member of the cartel. What do you do? Well, if you're smart, you change what you do for a living immediately and assimilate. As long as you're not here illegally, you assimilate into the American population. I don't know, just get a job. Like do something with your life, get a job, raise a family, and like live the American dream. Or you don't. So now take in combination the mass deportation in combination with designation of terrorist organizations where you're putting these guys' backs against a wall. And believe me, like I'm all for that. Like people have so easily entertained that it's going to be seemingly overnight that all these cartels are wiped off the planet. Except they forgot about the 10 to 20 million people that have infiltrated our country in the last few years, on top of the deeply rooted organizations of a cartel criminology that exists throughout the entire nation that support the consumer. And Americans are the consumers. We're the biggest consumer across the globe, not just for iPads and iPhones, but for cocaine and methamphetamines and fentanyl. So what happens when overnight you flip the coin and now you have millions of junkies who can't get their fix? It's like you have the zombie apocalypse overnight with warring factions that are declaring war against the United States because we've designated them terrorist organizations. And again, let me preface this by saying, guys, I'm on board, but I don't think we understand the second and third order effects of waging war in the country with a deeply embedded insurgency. What does that look like? And look, I might be chalking it up as something dramatic that's likely to happen, and it might not be anything. But I want you to be prepared for that potential. I was on a show called Team Room on Fieldcraft Survival's YouTube channel, which I'll link down below, and we were talking with Greg Lappin about what that potential would look like. And he said when he was with Andy Frisella and Greg Anderson, when he was on the Real AF podcast, they were talking about some intel that they got that showed that some of these organizations were targeting soft targets in rural communities to include schools. So let's take a step back. Imagine the scenario where a small percentage, like take 0.01% of the 20 million that are here for good reasons, and let's just say they were deliberately infiltrated for bad reasons. Just a 0.1%. That's still thousands of people. So let's just say it's 100 people. Those bad actors do a decentralized, meaning they're not centrally located, a decentralized strategic attack across the nation, hitting soft targets to include schools in rural neighborhoods and rural communities where the sheriff's department has 10 officers, if they're lucky. I mean, this infringement on this mother from Georgia in rural Fannin County that has a population of 300 people, they went after her because her 10-year-old son went for a walk to the General Dollar store. They arrested her for child endangerment the day before Halloween, where across the nation, thousands of children on their own go trick-or-treating, knocking on strangers' doors in costumes. So, I digress. Getting back to it, imagine in a scenario where rural communities across the nation are attacked. What would happen? Chaos would happen. We would lock down all of our borders of all of our states. We would have a policed society that would be locked down and everybody would be in fear. And already, as a campaign, they don't even have to have a lot of casualties. Just the fear is enough to cause chaos in the system. Oh, by the way, we have millions of junkies on the street that aren't getting their fix because JSOC is spanking targets in Mexico, dropping bombs on terrorist, in air quotes, heads. So it's a recipe for disaster where there's a lot of fallout that we need to consider. Guys, I've seen this happen in many scenarios where people who are doing briefs, typically on PowerPoint, are really efficiently and eloquently creating a picture of simplicity via squares and circles on a PowerPoint slide. There needs to be detailed, strategic, and tactical planning, course of action development, and thinking about second, third, fourth, fifth, and infinity effects that are going to impact not only the security of the border situation, but the security in our backyard, in our communities. What can you do about it? Because that's a lot. I'm exhausted. That's a lot to take in. What I want you to do is start thinking about not only about your personal defense, because it's real convenient to put a pistol in the waistband, wear your EDC fanny pack, and live your best life. It's a different thing to consider. What if I have to go to my house and protect my family from things that are happening on the street in front of my home? What if I have to respond to an institution, a store, or worse yet, a school, because the law enforcement agency in my backyard doesn't have the resources to protect the sovereignty and security of its own community? What do you think the law enforcement officers are going to be doing when all hell breaks loose? Sure, they wear the badge, they serve and protect, but they're going to serve and protect their own families. I would think as a priority, if I was a law enforcement officer and I had to weigh protect the community or protect my family that's in danger, it's going to be my family. So you need to have the ability to do all of that and also weigh the risk. I hope you use me as a valuable asset. I do a show on Fieldcraft Survival. I also do a show on Mike Glover Actual that's focused on this called Prepared, where we just take the issues of the day, like the issue with Daniel Penny being prosecuted for something that he was doing to protect citizens in a subway station that wasn't protected by police officers because the radicals in charge suppressed and defunded the police. So I talk about those topics, distill them for you, and then give you best recommendations. I also have my patreon.com/Mike Glover and obviously the Fieldcraft Survival app. These are things that I do every single day because it's my commitment and my purpose. I get up every single day motivated to do this type of thing. I live that life in the military, and this brings me profound purpose in the, I don't say afterlife, it's like the transition life of doing what I do today. And I can't really see myself doing anything else. When all this was going down, I was like, man, what am I going to do with my life? And I was thinking about all the things. I was thinking about even politics, and I was like, no, I don't know if that's what I want to do. I was thinking about, can I work for a government organization? I'm like, I'm pretty fed up with the government. Do I just get a regular job? And then I'm like, Mike, you've built something. I don't care if it's one person that's listening. You've built something, and you can't give up on that. I didn't say that by myself. You guys gave me the positive affirmation and told me to keep going. And I want to say from the bottom of my heart, closing out, thank you. Thank you for that. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube or the Spotify, vice versa, subscribe to both because I'll be releasing an audio or video version of this every single week. Also, stay tuned for all the channels because there's more content to come. I appreciate you guys. Until next time. Peace out, guys.
Something's wrong, but who's gonna change it? There's a storm out.